As we learned in Part 1, although the police have arrested the suspects in the case, they remain stubborn and refuse to reveal who masterminded and directed the group. A series of questions continue to arise. What is the connection between the 8 suspects who have been arrested? It seems that Vong Van Hung only got to know the other 7 suspects shortly before the crime, while Bui Van Kong, Luong Van Hung, Luong Van La, Pham Van Nien, Pham Van Dung, Cam Van Trong, and Bui T Kim too had close relationships or knew each other well from before. They often interacted and were all drug addicts, except for 2. If this assumption is correct, then there is certainly something very suspicious behind this case. This is precisely what the investigation team has been grappling with. Why did this group specifically target Cao Mỹ Duyên? What is the connection between these suspects and the victim? After all, Duyên was just a student, with no conflicts with the suspects, and she rarely lived in the area because she was studying in Thanh Nguyen. Why, then, was Duyên abducted, raped, and murdered in such a brutal manner? To clarify the relationships between the suspects and uncover the mysteries behind this case, the investigation team employed strategic tactics. On one hand, they informed Bui Van Kong that Vong Van Hung had accused Kong of being the mastermind behind Cao Mỹ Duyên abduction and murder. On the other hand, they told Vong Van Hung that Kong had accused him of being the mastermind. At this point, both suspects began to show signs of anxiety. After days of silence, Bui Van Kong finally confessed, stating that everything was orchestrated by Vong Van Hung. On the other hand, Vong Van Hung also insisted that he had initially confessed in order to protect the rest of the group, as the suspects had sworn that if caught, they would not reveal each other's identities. However, since Kong had broken this oath, Hung decided to tell the truth, claiming that the mastermind was Bui Van Kong. Thus, there was a conflict between the suspects' testimonies. The investigators also informed the remaining suspects that Bui Van Kong and Vong Van Hung had confessed everything, causing these individuals to panic, as they didn't know what Kong and Hung had disclosed. Expanding the scope of the investigation, the Dien Bien Provincial Police questioned. Most of the suspects arrested were drug addicts. So, where did their drug supply come from? And was there any connection between the drug trade in this case? Interrogating Luong Van Hung, who was worried that Vong Van Hung and Bui Van Kong had already confessed, the suspect quickly revealed a crucial piece of information when asked about their drug supply. According to Luong Van Hung, the abduction and murder of Cao Mỹ Duyên were closely tied to a drug trafficking ring. Luong Van Hung stated that around 2009, he began accompanying Bui Van Kong to conduct drug deals. Among these, Kong had previously dealt with a woman from Thanh Hung Commune, Dien Bien District, who turned out to be none other than Tran Thi Hien, Cao Mỹ Duyên mother. The group's drug supply came from a notorious drug lord in the criminal underworld of Dien Bien, identified as V. Van Tone, born in 1982. During the Lunar New Year of 2019, Bui Van Kong and his group of addicts frequently visited Tone's house. Some of Tone's neighbors were aware of this. However, during the holiday season, having guests over was a normal occurrence, so no one grew suspicious. Cam Van Chuong revealed that on the afternoon of the second day of the Lunar New Year, February 6, 2019, he visited Tone's house and saw Vong Van Hung there. The reason Vong Van Hung was present was because he and Tone were former cellmates at Yen Ha Prison in Sun La. It was also at this prison that Vong Van Hung and Bui Van Kong first met. Based on the testimonies of Luong Van Hung and Cam Van Chuong, as well as verification by the police through security cameras from several households near Tone's house, the relationships among the suspects became somewhat clearer. Bui Van Kong eventually admitted that he met Vong Van Hung at V. Van Tone's house, and it was Tone who hired both Kong and Hung to kidnap Cao Mỹ Duyên. With Kong's crucial testimony and verified evidence, V. Van Tone, born in 1982, was arrested on March 28, 2019, and identified as the mastermind behind the Cao Mỹ Duyên case. From here, the truth of the case began to unfold. However, when first detained, Tone persistently refused to confess and repeatedly misled investigators. After a lengthy process of questioning and gathering evidence, the full details of the case were finally revealed. In May 2009, V Van Ton became acquainted with Tran Thi Hien and sold her drugs worth 300 million Vietnamese dongs, but Hien was unable to pay. In June 2010, Ton was arrested for drug trafficking and imprisoned, leaving the debt unpaid. When Ton was released in 2017, he did not immediately pursue the old debt of 300 million Vietnamese dongs from Hien for reasons unknown. 2 years later, on January 31, 2019, the 26th day of the Lunar New Year, at 9 a.m., V Van Ton went to Muang Thon Market and happened to see Tran Thi Hien, the victim's mother, selling chickens at the market. At that moment, Ton remembered the 300 million Vietnamese dongs debt for drugs that Hien owed him from 10 years earlier. However, Hien said she could not pay as her buyers had not yet paid her. Afterward, Mrs. Hien went home. On the morning of February 3, 2019, the 29th day of the Lunar New Year, Vong Van Hung went to Ton's house and met Bui Van Cong there for the first time. V Van Ton mentioned wanting to reclaim the 300 million Vietnamese dongs that Mrs. Hien owed him. Cong also said that Mrs. Hien owed him 30 million Vietnamese dongs for drugs purchased in 2017. Speaking of Mrs. Tran Thi Hien, she had known Ton and Cong for a long time through regular drug transactions. Mrs. Hien frequently visited remote villages in Dien Bien to buy chickens to resell. According to some local sources, aside from selling chickens, Mrs. Hien also traded other household items for profit. Her family was considered relatively affluent in the area. It is suspected that selling chickens was merely a cover for her drug-buying activities. With the shared goal of reclaiming their money from Mrs. Hien, Ton and Cong discussed a plan in Ton's living room. Ton hired Vong Van Hung and Bui Van Cong to help collect the debt, promising to pay them in cash and drugs. Cong suggested that if they kidnapped Mrs. Hien to demand repayment, no one would pay the ransom for her. Therefore, they should abduct Mrs. Hien's daughter instead to secure the repayment. V Van Ton and Vong Van Hung agreed to Cong's plan. Afterward, Cong returned home and recruited Luong Van Hung, Luong Van Le, and Pham Van Niem to join the scheme. On the afternoon of February 4, 2019, the 30th day of the Lunar New Year, Cong took Vong Van Hung to Muang Thon Market, pointed out Cao Mỹ Duyên, Mrs. Hien's daughter, to Hung, introduced them, and had Hung request Duyen's phone number. At 6:40 p.m. that day, Vong Van Hung called Duyen to place an order for 13 chickens. Hung asked Duyen to deliver the chickens to the area near Market C13 in Ton Trong Ward, Dien Bien Phu City. Afterward, Hung booked a taxi from a friend's house to the meeting point with Duyen. At the same time, Bui Van Cong, Pham Van Niem, Luong Van Hung, and Luong Van Le left Cong's house in Team 11, Ton Nua Commune, Dien Bien District, using Cong's truck to execute the plan to kidnap Duyen. When Duyen was standing on the sidewalk with Vong Van Hung and taking the chickens out of the cage, Cong approached her from behind, wielding a nunchaku and swiftly restraining her. Then, the group lifted Duyen onto Cong's truck and drove her to Cong's house. Meanwhile, Vong Van Hung took all the belongings from Cao Mỹ Duyên, including a motorbike, 13 chickens, a phone, several personal documents, and other items. The total value of these belongings was 10,370,000 Vietnamese dongs. Hung then rode Duyen's motorbike with the chicken cage toward Dien Bien Phu City. At Bui Van Cong's house, Duyen regained consciousness. In a state of extreme panic and fear, she tried to escape. However, Bui Van Cong, Luong Van Hung, and Luong Van Le spotted her and dragged her back to the bedroom. At the same time, Bui T Kim Tu, Cong's wife, returned home and went into the bedroom, where she saw Duyen tied up and lying on the bed. Tu asked, "Who's that?" but was scolded by Cong. Tu left without saying anything further. Immediately afterward, Bui Van Cong, Pham Van Niem, Luong Van Le, and Luong Van Hung entered the bedroom and took turns raping Cao Mỹ Duyên for the first time. At this point, Pham Van Dung, Pham Van Niem's older brother, arrived at Cong's house. Cong enthusiastically announced that he had just captured a new girl from the city, and suggested entertaining Dung. Thus, in just one evening, Duyen was assaulted by 5 men, including Bui Van Cong, Luong Van Hung, Luong Van Le, Pham Van Niem, and Pham Van Dung. At 4 p.m. on February 6, 2019, Kong and his wife, Tu, went to V Van Tone's house in Timen, Thanh Commune, Dien Bien District, to exchange New Year's greetings. However, upon arrival, Kong told Tu to wait in the car while he went inside Tone's house alone. There, Kong met Vong Van Hung and Cam Van Chuong. Kong asked Tone, "Have you called Mrs. Heen yet?" Tone replied, "I called, but she said she has no money to pay." At this point, Kong told Tone that his group had assaulted Cao Mỹ Duyên and that the victim was now very weak. V Van Tone, though initially scolding Kong's group for assaulting Duyên when the plan was only to use her to pressure Mrs. Heen into paying the debt, eventually said, "Let's deal with it tonight with Vong Van Hung." Tone instructed Vong Van Hung to go to Kong's house first. At this time, Cam Van Chuong also accompanied him. At around 6 p.m. on February 6, 2019, Kong intended to enter the bedroom to abuse Duyên. Bui T. Kim Tu stood by the kitchen door looking up but did not object or report anything. In fact, Tu even fed and cleaned the victim. Dung and Trong later returned home. In Kong's living room, only Bui Van Kong, Pham Van Niem, Luong Van Le, Vong Van Hung, and Luong Van Hung remained. At around 10:30 p.m. on February 6, 2019, V Van Tone arrived at Kong's house. The group sat and talked while Tu went to the kitchen to get some food to feed Duyên. Tu went to the living room and told Kong, "Duyên is very weak, she only ate a few bites." Kong replied, "If she can't eat, let her be. She didn't pay, so kill her." Tone said, "If we can't get the ransom money, then we won't let her go back, we have to deal with her." Niem suggested, "If Duyên is weak, we should take her to the hospital for treatment." But Kong objected, saying that taking Duyên to the hospital would be no different than surrendering themselves. Kong proposed, "Let me and Vong Van Hung handle it." Bui T. Kim Tu overheard the conversation but said nothing. About an hour later, around 10:30 p.m. on February 6, 2019, Tone insisted, "Finish this quickly so I can go home." Kong drove the victim to an abandoned house nearby, belonging to his sister in Team 11, Thanh Nua Commune. After that, the group returned to Kong's house and discussed how to evade capture. Tone and Kong instructed everyone to behave normally during the new year and to remain silent if anyone was arrested. Kong even told his wife, Bui T. Kim Tu, to pretend the next morning that she had accidentally discovered Duyin's body in the abandoned house and to alert the neighbors and authorities to mislead the investigation. After that, the group dispersed. When the truth was revealed, apart from the crimes committed by V Van Tone, Bui Van Kong, Vong Van Hung, Luong Van Hung, Luong Van Le, Pham Van Niem, Pham Van Dung, Cam Van Trong, and Bui T. Kim Tu, the investigation determined that Mrs. Tran T. Heen was directly involved in the drug trafficking network with the above individuals, which ultimately led to the tragic murder of her daughter, Cao Mỹ Duyên. The chilling statement, "My daughter died with honor," uttered unexpectedly by Mrs. Heen, further highlighted her connection to the case. When the authorities organized a re-examination of Cao Mỹ Duyin's body, it was like a faint light shining through the dark path of the case. This step helped the investigative team uncover abnormalities and delve deeper into the relationship between Mrs. Heen and the suspects, unraveling one of the key knots of the case. Therefore, on March 25, 2019, Mrs. Heen was arrested for drug trafficking. However, her actions would be handled in a separate case. Afterward, the investigation team continued to clarify many details of the Cao Mỹ Duyên case. From the establishment of the investigative task force on February 8, 2019, to October 9, 2019, after nearly 9 months of investigation involving extremely complex developments, the case of the delivery girl murder officially came to an end. The investigative police of Dien Bien Province concluded the case involving murder, rape, and robbery, paving the way for the next stage, prosecution. On December 26, 2019, the preliminary trial was publicly held. During the trial, several defendants unexpectedly recanted their confessions, denying their involvement in the crimes. Among them, Bui Van Kong and Vong Van Hung claimed they were coerced into confessing under duress and physical abuse. "Now, the defendant declares the truth about my actions. Your Honor, I am innocent. I was coerced. I was forced to confess, and all accusations against me are unjust. I tell the truth. I would never bring someone to my house to kill them there, then dispose of the body at my sister's property. My vehicle is brand new. I would never commit such acts. The charges of rape and murder are not true. Yes, kidnapping someone? Kidnapping someone is not correct either. Then what crime? It's drug possession, sir. Possession, not kidnapping. Where was the drug seized? On the defendant's bed. Who bought it? The defendant bought it. From whom? The defendant bought it from Kong Ban. And why did you buy it? For the defendant's use. Other than using it yourself, did you allow anyone else to use it? However, after the suspects confronted the investigators, based on the case file, evidence, and testimonies, the court determined that the accusations made by Kong and Hung were groundless. The court also assessed that the actions of the defendants were inhumane and condemned by society. These were particularly heinous crimes, organized meticulously. On December 29, 2019, the preliminary court sentenced V. Van Tone, Bui Van Kong, Vong Van Hung, Luong Van Hung, Luong Van Le, and Pham Van Niem to death in this case. Although V. Van Tone did not directly kill Cao Mỹ Duyên, he was the mastermind orchestrating the other defendants and planning the abduction of Duyên. When the victim was weak, and the other suspects suggested killing her, Tone did not stop them but rather supported the idea. He witnessed the entire process as the suspects murdered and disposed of the victim's body, even discussing ways to evade justice afterward. Therefore, Tone receiving the highest sentence, the death penalty for murder, is completely justifiable. Pham Van Dung was sentenced to 10 years in prison for rape. Cam Van Chuong was sentenced to 9 years in prison for rape. Bui T. Kim Tu was sentenced to 3 years in prison for failing to report a crime. The 9 defendants were also ordered to compensate the victim's family with a total amount exceeding 200 million Vietnamese dongs. After the first trial, defendants Bui Van Kong, Pham Van Niem, and Vong Van Hung appealed the entire verdict, continuously claiming innocence and denying the charges. At the trial, V. Van Tone appealed for a lighter sentence, arguing that the death penalty was too harsh. He pleaded for the court to impose the lightest possible sentence, allowing him a chance to repent and reform his life. Judge: the defendant requests the lightest sentence, is that correct? V. Van Tone: yes, and I plead for a chance to repent, reform, and start over. Mr. Cao Van Hong, the victim's father and representative of the bereaved family, also appealed the entire first instance verdict. He argued that the court had overlooked certain perpetrators and failed to clarify the motive behind the crime. He requested that the 6 defendants not be sentenced to death, citing the need for humanitarian considerations and to ensure the case didn't reach a dead end. On June 16, 2020, the Hanoi High People's Court convened a court of appeal. Besides those who had appealed, 5 other defendants, including Luong Van Hung, Luong Van Le, Bui T. Kim Tu, Pham Van Dung, and Cam Van Trong, were also summoned to court due to the bereaved family's appeal. On June 17, 2020, after more than a day of hearings and deliberations, the Hanoi High People's Court rejected the appeals of innocence and requests for reduced sentences from Bui Van Kong, Vong Van Hung, Pham Van Niem, and V. Van Tone regarding the murder of Cao Mỹ Duyên. The appellate court also reviewed the charges against the 5 defendants who did not appeal: Bui T. Kim Tu, Luong Van Hung, Luong Van Le, Pham Van Dung, and Cam Van Trong. It determined that the original trial's sentences were appropriate and upheld the verdicts. Regarding the appeal from Cao Mỹ Duyên family claiming that the court had overlooked certain perpetrators, the court requested the family provide evidence to substantiate these accusations. However, the victim's father, Mr. Cao Van Hong, stated that his accusations were based solely on personal reasoning. Considering that any case must rely on documented evidence to reach a conclusion rather than personal assumptions, the panel of judges rejected the appeal from the victim's family claiming that the court overlooked certain perpetrators. For the above reasons, the appellate court upheld the first instance verdict. Music. It should also be noted that prior to the first instance trial of the Cao Mỹ Duyên case in late November 2019, the Dien Bien Provincial People's Court also tried Duyên's mother, Tran Thi Hien, and her accomplices, including Bui Van Kong, V. Van Tone, Luong Van Hung, and VT2, Tone's wife, for the charges of storing, transporting, trafficking, or embezzling narcotics. During the trial, Mrs. Heen repeatedly wiped away tears and insisted on her innocence, claiming that she did not know the other defendants. However, based on evidence and statements from her accomplices, Mrs. Heen was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She later appealed the ruling, claiming wrongful conviction. At the appellate hearing in May 2022, the High Court found it necessary to clarify several issues unresolved in the first instance trial, such as conflicting statements from the defendants, forensic examination results, reenactment of the investigation, and the transactions of money and narcotics. As a result, the court decided to annul part of the first instance verdict concerning Mrs. Heen's charges and sentence. As of the time of making this video, the supplementary investigation into Mrs. Heen's involvement in the narcotics case is still ongoing, and she remains in custody. Surrounding the case of Cao Mỹ Duyên, numerous rumors have surfaced on social media, and some of them are not without basis. First, many people have spread information on social media claiming that Cao Mỹ Duyin's mother was someone who liked to flaunt her wealth. This allegedly led the perpetrators to plot the abduction of the victim to demand ransom. When Mrs. Heen refused, the perpetrators murdered her daughter. According to the Dien Bien Provincial Police, this information is entirely false. In addition, rumors emerged on social media claiming that there were internal disputes within the victim's family. Some even cited the absence of Cao Mỹ Duyin's father from discussions since the incident as a sign of underlying issues. Further speculation suggested that Cao Mỹ Duyin's father was involved in gambling and drug addiction. However, this information has not been verified. There was also widespread speculation that Cao Mỹ Duyên was pregnant before she was abducted and murdered. Some sources claimed that her father, Mr. Cao Van Hong, had requested clarification regarding the alleged pregnancy, as it was reported that she had a boyfriend and was taken for a checkup, where a potential pregnancy was noted before the incident. Addressing this matter, a forensic examiner from the Institute of Criminal Science under the Ministry of Public Security confirmed that during the examination, only a single genetic profile belonging to the victim was found. In reality, even after the case concluded, with most details clarified and the perpetrators held accountable, some perplexing details and controversial rumors continue to linger. If you found this video helpful, please share and give it a like. On the screen are some other interesting videos for you. Click on one to keep watching. Thank you, and see you in the next video.